Welcome to another edition of the Diary of a Sales Expert podcast. And as you know, I also love to do some brilliant interviews with fantastic business leaders when I do these podcasts. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by a friend of mine, Bradley Hatchett, who is the founder and managing director of Network My Club, who is and has been which is a fantastic growing organisation based in the UK, but he's growing maybe overseas in time. He'll talk about international expansion in time, but Bradley's started Network My Club and has had a fantastic business career in sport and in other areas. And I'm really glad that he's able to join me and talk about networking and how sales and business and anything we can do to achieve great results through. Bradley, thanks so much for joining me and giving up the time.
Brilliant to be here, James. Good. I'm looking forward to it.
So look, I've tried to do a bit of an introduction for you there, but I've probably got it slightly wrong. But talk to people that don't know you a little bit about your history. I know you worked in sports, and then you decided to set up Network My Club. So give people a little bit of a flavour of what you've got up to when you started Network My Club.
Yeah, for sure. So Network My Club is a business networking events and membership organisation. So currently, as speaking now, we are based across London, the Southeast, and starting to expand into new territories. And one of the I guess the history of Network My Club is, first and foremost, absolute sport fanatic. So I wanted to be involved in sport in one way, shape or form. And when I realised I wasn't probably going to make it as a professional, be it football, cricket, golf, whatever it might be, I decided that I just wanted to be involved in sport. And effectively, Network My Club, we operate all of our events out of sports stadiums. So that's our USP, as it were. So all of our events are in these really iconic and inspiring sporting environments, which are great to bring people together in. And that idea came from my time working at Brighton and Hove Albion for 5 years in the commercial sales team. So those sponsorship, partnership sales. So I spent 5 years working there, selling to local businesses, whether it's hospitality or partnerships or sponsorships. And I also used to run networking events out of the Amex Stadium and realised very quickly that the stadium was empty for 95% of the year, and saw a good opportunity and saw a challenge that a lot of other stadiums had, was to fill those rooms outside of match days. And that's what we help them do by bringing businesses to the stadium. And then in turn, those stadiums are great places to do events from because they're really accessible. They've got great backgrounds and they're really sort of inspiring and iconic in their own right. So that's a little bit of history behind how I started it, my background, why it exists. But as I say, as a sport fanatic, I'm thrilled every week I get to travel to some kind of sports stadium and get to meet some brilliant businesses and deliver some networking events.
And we're going to come on and talk about lots more about networking in general, but for you as the USP of creating Network My Club, it's a really interesting USP, isn't it? Because you mentioned sort of that's our sweet spot. And of course, networking is, there is lots of different networking organisations out there, but for you to go and say, no, actually, we're going to take this to big stadiums, like I know you do the Amex Stadium, do Oval, I know you do Ascot Racecourse, and absolutely incredible places for sporting events. It's a really nice niche, isn't it? Because it gets people wanted to go to the base, but also wanted to network at the same time. So yeah. When you looked at the idea for it, how did you sort of get that form started? Apart from sort of knowing that there was this gap there, what were the sporting clubs like to start with you, and were they open to the idea?
Yeah, for sure. I think first and foremost, the challenge to address and the problem we are solving is the fact that these stadiums are hugely underutilized outside of their main purpose, be it football, cricket, rugby, racehorses, or whatever it is. So that was the first problem we were solving. Then as we started to do events, I was still fairly young at that point, even though I'd been out going to lots of networking events in my previous roles. I think one of the most common pieces of feedback we started to get were, these venues are great, they're really cool to come to in it. And so the secondly, it was, this makes a difference from a restaurant or a bar or a hotel where 9 out of 10 networking events tends to take place. And, I've been in those events myself. You go into a restaurant or that hotel conference room and you're really struggling for that conversation. It's not flowing, it's quite a sterile environment. And what we've learned was that those sporting backdrops helped start the conversations, which when you're at a networking event, that is one of the hardest things, right? People, in my time, the most common challenge I've found from networkers that are out there is, how do I join conversations? How do I leave conversations? And we just started to learn that these amazing sporting backdrops just help start a conversation, whether you like sport or not, because you might find a sport fanatic meet and not so much of a sport fanatic, and they, that person is just eager to tell that other person about why the backdrop is so historic and what's gone on before there, and it just happens to be a really good conversation starter. So that I guess that secondary sort of benefit that we found from hosting events at sports stadiums came a little bit later on, but the first problem we helped solve was working with these sports clubs and sports stadiums to help bring businesses together at their venue, which, as I say, very, very accessible with public transport, parking, etc., which is a big box to tick when it comes to events.
Obviously, you've been in business now for, I don't know, I'm not sure when you founded, what date you founded, never much up, but first move from being in sales and working and, having the paycheck every month to setting up your own business. How did that feel? And what would describe those sort of thought processes? Because it is a challenge for anyone in business, isn't it? To go and start your own thing and to, you've now built a team and you've got, this great infrastructure in place, but it wasn't always that way, right? I'm guessing the first few months were a bit scary, or were they? Talk to us about how that went, how that came about and how it felt for you.
I think I was a little bit naive at the time that I just jumped straight into it. I started the business when I was 24, 25, so really young, to be honest. And, saw this, had this idea in front of me and thought, how hard could this be, really? Hugely underestimating how hard it is to, start a business, run a business, and then, get an idea off the ground. So, yeah, you're right. Going from that very secure salary that you get every year to then overnight you go, right, I've got to drive this business forward. You've got to be everything, right? As a sole business owner, you've got to be salesperson, you've got to be marketing person, you've got to be absolutely everything. So I learned that very quickly. I think one of the things that's been very much installed in me is a really driven work ethic from my parents. Mum's got a bit of a entrepreneurial background. Dad has been working in the city for as long as I've been alive, and on those 5:30 trains in the morning into London and back at 7:30. So growing up around mum running her own business and dad doing that, it was kind of right to earn a good life. You've got to work hard, and I guess when I came to the point of starting the business, I consider myself very lucky that, at 24, 25, I didn't have any big commitments. I didn't have a mortgage. I was still living at home at the time. I didn't have a partner or anything like that. So for me, it was mum, with her entrepreneurial background, said, look, there's a spare bedroom we can convert into an office if you really need it. And, you can live here rent free for as long as you really need to see if the idea is one that we can get off the ground. And I used the royal we there, particularly in the first couple of years. But starting in 2015, 16, and 24, 25, I think I was just very naive to what came behind running a business. And probably if I had my time again, knowing what I know now, would I have made that jump? Probably not. But I'm, so proud of myself that, I did. And, I have a lot of people to thank, particularly my parents, for giving me that support and that background to, not have to worry about other things. And I know a lot of people aren't as blessed, with that, particularly when starting a business, maybe a little bit later on in life. So, anyone that starts a business of any age, but particularly ones that come a little bit later in life with those bigger commitments and, real bills to pay, should we say, I think where they get my utmost respect, and they're the people that that I just bow to when I see them and think of them to do that with all that behind you. Don't know if I would have that today. When I was wet behind the ears, 24, 25, so when I started it.
it's some really good points you make there around, and it's also the, I was going to ask a question around who inspires you and sort of what drove you on to doing what you're doing, and like you say, parents and also other influence. I know your brother is a big influence on your life in terms of his, also not just from a sporting perspective, but from a mindset perspective in terms of what he. Having those role models is critical though for a business owner, isn't it? Because especially a lot of people that come to, and we'll talk about Network Club a little bit at the end, because you have hundreds of people that come to the events, and some of them are bigger and some of them are smaller businesses. But just being a small business owner is tough. You need those sources of inspiration and motivation and drive and help behind you. Even if you haven't got them from parents, whether it's friends or people that are close to you, isn't it? You need that support.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned my brother, actually, and I know you know him, because if he happens to be listening and find himself listening to this and I didn't mention him, I'm sure I would hear about it over Christmas lunch in the next couple of weeks. But no, you're completely right. I was, again, very fortunate to have a really good support network around me, and a brother that was extremely driven to become a professional cricketer against all odds, and then go through the adversity he did, having to retire really early and reinvent his life to an extent. So yeah, huge inspiration. My godfather, Richard, who's also a co-director in Network My Club, so he's the reason I started to work in the business side of sport. That he has a background working in broadcasting, specifically in sport, so the Olympic Games and Champions League and some really amazing organisations. And he was that person as one of Dad's really good friends, when I was growing up and getting taken to all these amazing Champions League games when I was really young. And I'd always leave saying, Dad, whatever Richard does, I want to do that. And, he, when it got to that point of having to make that leap from paid salary, secure, safe life, as it were, into starting your own business and the real unknown, Mum suggested to just run the idea by Richard, and Richard came on board as a silent partner, but more advisor, and just really gave me that support that I needed. And again, came from my own personal network that I was very fortunate to have. So yeah, you're right. To run a business is extremely lonely, and that's something that I've come to learn. But thankfully, I've got a very good personal network, and then over the years, just built up a really good professional network, which I'm sure we'll come on to, and that's helped me not just in terms of growing the business, but it's helped me from a psychological perspective and a perspective of not making running a business seem so lonely, because you realise actually you're not alone, and there's many other people in similar positions to you. So having that balance of a professional and personal network is key, because you can get something from each.
It is key, you're right, but it's also it's in the case of who you are as a person, because a lot of people, as I mean, mentoring is a thing that I know well, and helping people grow and develop their business is key. So a lot of people sometimes having a mentor is great, but you've got to take the advice on board of the mentor as well. I mean, half the time, if you've got someone like Richard, who's obviously been there and done it in business, and there'll be times, I'm sure, where you'd have thought, I'm sure I should go down this route, and then you've got someone that's maybe giving you a different path, or different a different, not different path, but just a different thought process to go through. So it's still being able to apply those those elements, isn't it? It's no point having someone there if you can't go and take it or take their feedback and advice on board.
No, for sure. And I think where Richard maybe lacks in running a small business, for example, he's been there, done it when it comes down to contracts and negotiations and drawing up agreements, which is something that we do with all of our partner stadiums and venues. Very early on, I'd draw up a terms of agreement and a contract and send it across to a venue, and they'd amend it. And just because I was so giddy and eager to get the idea off the ground, I would have just gone yes, no problem, and just abided by all their suggestions and terms. Whereas Richard saw things a bit longer term and said, actually, we need to protect ourselves in this instance. We need to look at this. We need to look at that. So, I think you can draw experiences and knowledge from different people in different ways, and I guess that comes down to knowing the people that are around you. And I've done very similar in my own sort of development of a mentor and a number of mentors that I work with. When I started building a team, I wanted to work with someone as a mentor who has become renowned or has got experience in building a team, because that's something for me that I take a lot of pride in, and want my team to get, to feel like they're part of, something rather than just coming into work 9 to 5. So I purposely started working with 2 mentors actually that had experience running small businesses with teams. But then one of my other mentors was one of the co-founders of Ted Baker, and he was instrumental in their employee engagement programs that they became renowned for. So I think it's about understanding where you need that support, and perhaps who in your network can be that support, because equally I can also help others in my network in different ways. So I think it has to work both ways, of course, and you can't just be take, and I'm sure we'll come on to that from a networking perspective. But yeah, when you're running a business and building up a network, it's very important to understand where and who that person could add value, because that helps them become a valuable person in your network, which you'll feel more obliged to help down the road for sure. And vice versa, where can you help others in your own experiences?
Yeah, and we're going to come on and talk about networking in a minute, but sort of final question before we get to that point is around what can business learn from sport? Because obviously you're involved in sports, been involved in sports from an early age, and but you've seen it also with but also in the events you run. There is some, you are connected with sport day to day in what you do. So let's have a sort of top 2 or 3 things that you think businesses can learn from sport, because they are very much about winning and succeeding, but that maybe those in sport also just take, slightly different views of how to do it. I mean, any suggestions you share with people on what we as business people can learn from those in the sporting arena?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, from an involvement from a professional sport environment, being very close to my brother and playing cricket with a lot of ex and current professional cricketers, you get to pick their brains and understand, a lot of those similarities and crossovers. And we've been very fortunate to work with certain organisations that help professional athletes transition out of the game when they have to retire into the business world, into the real world, shall we say. And I've learned a lot of those crossovers from, the fact that a lot of athletes are very target driven. You give them a target and you give them a path. They're very determined to make that happen. One of the things that I think I've learned from that sense in my own personal experience is that teamwork element. Is that being able to work as a team. I think personally, one of the best things my parents did was to, not force, but because my brother and I were probably going to play sport one way, shape or form. But, I used to play football on a Saturday and Sunday throughout the winter. I then would play cricket through the summer and typically through the winter in indoor cricket. And I genuinely have built up a lot of my personal and now professional network from playing sports. So from my experience as an amateur athlete, and I think there's a lot of salespeople and business owners out there that play amateur sport, what you have to remember is you never know who people in your team know. And I can give some really good personal examples of that. So I got the job working at Brighton at the Amex Stadium because I used to play football with the marketing manager at Brighton. And I was just sat in the changing room and said, "Oh, Alan, I'm just about to leave, my internship, and I've got nothing to go into. I know the Amex has just opened and you work there. Is there anything that I can do to come in and help?" And following week, I was in having a meeting with Alan and the commercial manager, and lo and behold, they needed an extra pair of hands because the new stadium had just opened, and that all came from the fact that I played football with that person. And I think bring it forward to now, and even though I don't play as much sport now, still play cricket, but in my team alone, you've got digital marketing managers, you've got designers, you've got people that work in clothing, you've got all sorts of walks of life. And I think sport opens doors to lots of opportunity. And I say it's similar to going into a networking event. You never know who in that room can change the course of your business or even your life. And I think the same with playing sport. You never know who those people who those people know, and you get to know these people very well outside of business, and you form a human relationship, and no doubt you're going to be talking about business. And I've been very fortunate that when I've played sport, I've built up a great personal network, but you have to remember that your personal network can still become a professional network, because everyone has careers and could have a door to open for you. So I think from my personal experience, as I say, that being in a team environment, not knowing who everyone knows, but those crossovers between sport and business are so apparent. And I can't speak from a professional standpoint, but I could definitely speak from a amateur sporting perspective.
You mentioned a number of things there, which I think are key, which is, A, about the network, which we'll talk to now, but also about that element of teamwork and utilize it. And especially for you at Network, but to others, you grow. I've had the, privilege and pleasure to meet your team. And the one thing I'll say, about, not only are they great at what they do, but they're so engaged as part of the process. They feel part of Network My Club. It's never a case of you're talking to someone that's just a receptionist at a networking event, which actually is huge credit to you, that they sort of embody and breathe this passion that you do for it, which is actually really difficult in some cases for a lot of business owners to get that through to their team, because everyone knows that the business is owned by a director or a leader, but whenever they just embody it. So before we get in, I'm going to get into the networking bit. Is there one or two things you've done to embed that team culture? And culture is so critical, isn't it, for small businesses? First members of your team, how can you get them to be as engaging as what your team are in NMC?
Yeah, for sure. I think that comes again from that naivety that I had. When I started taking on members of staff, first and foremost, you realise even before starting the business that you spend more time with your work colleagues than you probably do your partner and even your best friends. So working alongside people that you like is an important starting point. I think, again, that naivety of starting a business, I didn't really know any different. So I've always been very transparent with everyone from a performance perspective and numbers perspective. I feel like that's given them, that's offered a little bit more chance for them to empathize with me as the owner. And I've always been very transparent. When people join the business, and said, look, you will grow with the business, and you are in a small business. So yes, you'll feel the bumps along the road, but you'll also be able to drive some real change and some real growth, and your ideas are going to be heard. And we're a small, nimble, agile business that if you come to us with a good idea and we can implement it, you will be heard and you will drive that change. And I've always, again, my team are probably sick of me saying it, but I say to Jack, our head of sales, I say, look, mate, I'm not a sales expert, so I want to give you the tools that you need to do what you do best and get out your way. And same with Alicia, our events manager, and Samantha, our membership manager. I say, I can't be an expert in absolutely everything. Of course, I'll share my opinion and my thoughts and give you feedback where I need to, but I just cannot be an expert in everything. So I do put that accountability on the team, and that's something that I've learned to do more and more, which, you find out, who wants that level of accountability when you give it to them. And I think in the early stages, for sure, I was maybe a little bit too hand-holding and a little bit too protective of doing that and resisting to the idea of giving that work away. And ultimately, if you give people that direction and say, this is what you are accountable for, I'm not trying to do it, and I don't have enough time in the day or mental capacity to try and do everyone's jobs. And I think when I've started to learn that's helped. So yeah, I think just getting people bought in and feeling part of that journey and being very transparent, and getting them to enjoy the wins with you, that's important. And I consider myself very much part of the team. I don't love using I hate it when people say that's my boss. I've heard the team refer to me as the boss, so I absolutely cringe at that. I just can't bring myself to think like that. And I think I very much refer to them as my colleagues rather than my team, and that's exactly how I work and perceive them, because they are doing as much, if not more than I am in terms of that contributing. So yeah, a few things in there. Hopefully that helps. But back to my at the start there, I think I was just quite naive and thought, never running a business before, having come from a big corporate background, you could call it, working at somewhere like Brighton where you don't get access to numbers and things like that. It's apart from what's in your channel. And I maybe didn't know any different. And I'm just always very transparent and about performance and where we are as a business. So
I think some brilliant points you mentioned. That's why, I think 4 or 5 great elements that you've shared there about helping people involved. And I love that one, especially around the colleagues rather than, your team. I've got a pet hate when people talk about staff, and it's like staff are a sort of thing you have as a, it's like, it feels like it's, whereas actually your team is part of what you do. So, well, let's get into networking. So I've got to lost. Come on, let's talk, because you're a networking veteran now. You've done hundreds of events or whatever. What are the top 2 or 3 things that people that when you see get so badly wrong with networking? Because unfortunately, we've seen it all, and I think we're on the same page in some of this. But what are some of the top 2 or 3 things that you see people get badly wrong with networking? Because and how can and how should they start to use networking to grow and build their own awareness of their company and what they do?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's two parts to it for me. I think first part is things that happen before you've even walked through the door of a networking event. So the first things first, I think people put too high an expectation on networking straight from the get-go. And what happens there is suddenly your mindset is, I need to get something from this. I need to, drive instant sales. I need to get a return on my time, return on my investment, whatever it is. So that expectation drives a mindset that leads to an approach that actually works against you when it goes networking, because with that approach, you walk through the door, suddenly, lo and behold, your conversations are very much focused around you. You're trying to draw all the conversation back to you. You're using I rather than talking about other people. And so for me, that expectation, too high expectation, leads to an approach where suddenly you're pitching and selling to people and doing, you actually works against you. And then it goes into, actually going to that event, like I was saying, and the way that you conduct yourself in terms of in conversations, joining conversations, leaving conversations. There's so many practical things that you can consider, and networking is a skill that you can hone and improve. It's not something that you're just born with. And I've seen people that are maybe more natural than others, but ultimately there is a little bit of a science behind it. But in summary, I think with that expectations and then that leading into the mindset and the approach, what I call it is the networking doom cycle, where basically you have that mentality of needing to get as much from networking as possible. You lead with that very sales and selfish approach. You then don't get anything from it because people actually push you away because you're too forceful in your nature of selling to them. And then you go away and say, oh, networking doesn't work for me. And then when your pipeline needs refilling up, is like, I need to go back out networking and try that again. And it just becomes a bit of a doom cycle, as I call it. So that's for me where I see people sort of fall at the first hurdle before they've even started going to events, is that expectation, getting your mindset and your approach and what actually networking is, getting that right first, and then going to the events becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff you shared there, and it would it be wrong of me? I'll say it, but I feel I've been, not with NMC events, I have to say, but we've been to a lot of other events where actually I see a lot of people, they're very selfish when it comes to networking. They go into it with an intention just literally to be what they can gain from it, and they don't have this, this intrigue and curiosity to get to know someone and to understand someone else. And it feels like, and we could all see them a mile off. They're people that just, you go in there and you think, you're just doing this from a selfish perspective. It's as if you've just got yourself to please, not else. And and they think it works, but it doesn't, does it? I mean, in general, you guys must talk to a lot of people, and there'll be people that will go, oh, it's them again. They're coming out to pitch their services and pitch what they do, and it bores people. Doesn't it?
Yeah, no, for sure. And to the point where we at Network My Club have now defined even further our target market. So we have we set our target market, not just demographic of those businesses, the geographic nature of those businesses, but we actually look at, the psychographics. So how do those people think? So for us, what we want are business leaders that understand that networking is a marathon, not a sprint. Because if you understand that, your approach is going to be one that we can support and that we want at the events. Because if you think it's a very short-term activity, from a sales perspective and business development perspective, that approach is going to be one that you're going to come into the event, you're going to be doing all those networking no-nos that, you so often hear about, just giving people business cards straight away, pitching at them and looking over their shoulder, waiting for the next victim of who you can go and talk to. So, but for us, we have that, we have that psychographic element that you must fit, that it actually is two-part. So it's, you understand that networking is a marathon, not a sprint, and that you want to help others. And that for me is just the combination that networking is, you give yourself a much better chance of networking working for you with those two ways of thinking about it. And yeah, as I say, unfortunately, networking is a skill that when you start a business, and we go back to that point of us talking about starting a business, one of the first pieces of advice people give you is, oh, you've got to go out and network now, haven't you? You've got to go build up your network. And people are quite quick to tell you where to go networking and what events to go to, but no one will tell you how. No one gives you that advice. No one hands you a how-to manual of how to go out and network. And that's something that I've learned over the years of running over 400 events now. And, I've seen the best and worst of networking. So that was a big reason and a big inspiration behind me starting a little personal project. And that's writing my weekly networking newsletter called The Networker, which in time and over the next few months will lead into a digital course, a very affordable digital course that people, when they start networking, can sort of can take in this resource to just set them off on the right path. Because otherwise, as I say, you go back into that networking doom cycle of not doing it the right way, attending the wrong events, and suddenly you think networking's not for you, but actually you've just not been doing it the right way, perhaps, that I've seen work for a lot of people if done right.
It's one of the, and again, I will say I'm a bit biased, so I remember at MSC, and even though I live where I live, I keep saying, if you have some locations near me, I'd be over there. I'd be there every week, but I go to as many as I can in London. But one of the things, a lot of people are scared of networking, and they're quite, afraid of what it, means to go out networking. And I guess part of that is also because they get, everyone's got this thing of, in certain networking events, you've got to stand up and do your 1 minute. And the good thing about your events is it's not about that. It's not about people having to stand up and being, you can see the look of terror on people's faces when they've got to stand up and do something, haven't they? So I guess you guys, benefit of what you do. But what else do you think? The other people are scared of it. And any tips when someone listening to this going, yeah, but I'm scared of networking. I don't know how I can do it, and I don't know what to do and where to do it. Like you say, obviously you've got your course and subscribe to the networker, but any other 2 or 3 tips you'd give them if they're scared of it or frightened of sort of, pat a room of people they don't know?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's that fear of rejection, isn't it? It's that fear of going into a conversation and maybe people thinking that you've got to be the best conversationalist out there. You've got to have hundreds of stories up your sleeve. You've got to have people in the palm of your hand rolling around laughing. That's really not the reality. Some of the things that, some of the most common challenges that I hear from people that subscribe to the networker is, that fear of joining and leaving conversations. And actually it's quite funny. So people have probably as equal fear of joining as leaving conversations as they do joining, which is quite funny. So I often frame it and say, look, you're not walking into a restaurant or a bar where you're approaching groups of friends where, frankly, joining those conversations when you're not part of that group would be a little bit weird, would be a little bit strange. But you're going to a networking event where everyone has they haven't actively done it, but they all subscribe to the same mentality of, I'm here to network and build my network and meet some new people, right? So I think if you lead with that approach and also understand that everyone's there as fearful as perhaps you might be, as much as some people might not show it on the face of it, but everyone is, let's talk about joining and leaving conversation, because that's a big part of where this fear stems from. So I think joining conversations, some of the advice I would share there is look at, if you're really worrying about joining a group of people, I wouldn't say join a group of more than 3 people. in a conversation. I think at that point it becomes a little bit too much of a a dynamic. It's like a Zoom or a Teams call. When you've got more than 3 or 4 people, it only takes one person to speak over someone else and things like that. Immediately also going into a group of 3 or more people, all eyes are going to be on you as well, because you've just joined the conversation. So again, that's quite scary. So I would always suggest look for a group of 2 people. That helps you, build that dynamic. Also, take it once you've grabbed a drink from the bar or tea, coffee, stand on the edge of the room and look who else is around the edge of the room. And I guarantee there will be someone on their own looking around the room, or overlooking, in our case, it might be overlooking the pitch or something like that from the lounge, and just go and, join conversation, because they were probably in that position of maybe a little bit fearful of joining conversation. They've not found the right group to join. And then maybe just take a step back. If you do join a conversation with 2 or 3 or more people, just bear in mind, and I'm sure you've been in this situation, that if you're in a conversation and it's flowing nicely and someone joins, suddenly you feel obliged to speak to that person, and that it's got to be all about them. So I say there is a lot of onus on you joining a conversation, and I would suggest that if you join a conversation, to say things like, look, guys, don't stop because of me. I'll join in when the time's ready, and I'll see where I can contribute. I think that is it's a really big thing, that because I'm sure everyone listening that's been at a networking event and has been interrupted is not the right word, because that's not the right phrase. I think it's, if someone's joined the conversation does turn to that person naturally, because everyone wants to be polite and make them feel included. But actually, that you just never know if that conversation was flowing nicely, and the people maybe were chatting about something really healthy about potential collaboration or working together or something like that. So I think taking onus to break that stigma. And then lastly, just leaving conversations. I think the reason, I think it might be the British nature in us, but perhaps we just feel a little bit rude of leading conversations. But actually, the reason why a lot of people are still in conversations at networking events, when you look around the room, is because a lot of them are too fearful to leave. So, to lead those conversations, don't feel bad for saying, look, guys, it's been really great to meet you. I'm going to connect up with you all, and we can hopefully progress this conversation. I'm here to network, like I'm sure you all are. I'm just going to mingle around the room and see who else is here. Now, that would be my choice. But I know a lot of people use I've got to get another tea or coffee, I've got to run to the loo, I've got to do something. By all accounts, use that if you want, but don't be afraid to just call it what it is and say, look, we're all here to network, guys. I don't want to keep you from networking with other people. I'm going to mingle around, and hopefully I'll catch up with you a bit later. If not, we'll follow up after the event. So long-winded answer there about sort of the fears around networking, but I think it does stem from that joining and leaving conversation and wondering, what people are going to think about you. Right? That's just nature, natural human nature.
And they were brilliant advice, and I think the element about joining and finishing conversations or ending conversations is the bit people have that concern with. I know sometimes I don't mind happily joining, but you do have that element of, right, I've enjoyed talking to this person, but feel like a bit bad if I don't. And then I also have this thing, it's maybe just me. Well, they'll be on their own then, and I feel sorry for them. I feel a bit bad that they're on their own. Do you know what I mean? So it's got all this thing. But you're right. You've got to. And I always used to go to a networking event and try and pick up 3 business cards or pick up 4 business cards and actually just say, right, I'm not going to get around everyone in the room, but I'm just going to try and get to know 3 or 4 people. And one of the things I remember you shared a brilliant story about at a previous event, which is, is also not judging that person. Because a lot of people, there's sometimes what they'll do is they'll go into a networking event and then they'll talk to someone and then that person's in this area. Oh, that's not for me. I remember you shared a brilliant story about a lady who went to a networking event in London, and she had, even though her current role wasn't relevant for someone, she had a background that was incredibly high powered, wasn't it? And I remember you sharing that story. I don't know if you can share it maybe with everyone today, but just be curious and be intrigued by people and realize it's not just them, it's their networks as well that you're engaging with, isn't it?
Yeah, something I say a lot is to think beyond the person that you're speaking to, because again, I spoke about it earlier when you're when you're playing sport, you've got a personal network that you can tap into when you meet people at an event, not just a professional one. And also it's more than that, what meets the eye be on a guest list or a name badge, right? And and a short summary of that story was a lady called Kerry. She runs a small virtual assistant business, and if people would genuinely be curious about finding out about her, because she came to me and said, look, Brad, everyone just seems to overlook me because I run this really small business. It's just me. But if they were interested in finding out more about her, they would have found out that she wanted to spend more time with her 3 kids. So that gives you something extra to talk about. She was fed up of commuting into London for 20 plus years. And they would have found out that previous to starting this business, she was partner at one of the UK's biggest law firms. And I think people maybe wrote her off because it was like, oh, what can you do for me? But actually it's, how can I help you? Who do you know? Tell me a little bit about you. And that being curious about people, you just never know who people know, and thinking beyond that person you're speaking to will probably, well, I'm going to say it will lead to more opportunities than the people that you are speaking to, from those referrals, from those recommendations. That is what drives a lot of business from the back of networking.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Exactly. Just be curious and be intrigued by that person. And again, it goes back to your point at the start. If you go to, can't go to every networking event every day. If you go to 1 or 2 a month, and then you're building up a network, and suddenly you're engaging with 3 or 4 people at a time. Suddenly that's sort of like 4 to 6, 8, 8 people. And whatever tips do you have for people on of following up as well? Because obviously, let's say you've engaged with someone that you've really found been a great connection, or you felt that there could be some intrigue. There's that nervousness that people have about following up as well. But I guess that's where the power of LinkedIn and those sort of tools, just to connect up and arrange a virtual coffee or coffee at the next event, maybe, and just get to know them a bit more.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, something that you've actually taught me in the past, James, is not needing to follow up with absolutely everyone. I think people feel that whoever you meet at a networking event, you need to arrange a follow-up one-to-one. You need to have a meeting. You need to have a coffee. And actually, a lot of times people are just doing it the way, maybe as a tick box exercise or feeling busy. But no, I think that following up is crucial. I use the analogy called the networking event sandwich. So you have to look at attending the event is the filling, but the bread is the before and after of the event. And if you're not doing anything before or after the event, you're leaving a lot on the table, and that's what holds it together. So researching the guest list before, reaching out to people, setting up your diary around the event so you can catch up with others that are either attending or clients or prospects. And then after the event, it's about following up with. I think it's about following up with everyone you meet, but at different levels. So if you meet someone and maybe for the first time and there's not any immediate synergy or ways that you can work together, dropping them a LinkedIn connection, personalizing a message to say, look, really enjoyed our conversation. Hopefully I'll see you at another event soon. P.S. Hope your son does well at his sports day in the coming week. Something like that. But then if you genuinely see there's a way that you could help someone or someone could work with you or vice versa, being proactive in following that up and saying, look, can we get a call scheduled in? Shall we get a coffee or a in-person meeting if it's suitable? Can we get that in the diary? If not, it's about nurturing that conversation. I think a lot of people follow up once and maybe send a LinkedIn message or an email, don't hear anything back, and they're like, okay, move on to the next one. I've got a process and a system that I encourage people to use, which is called the 12-4-1 system, and it's a weekly exercise that takes half an hour. I do it every Wednesday morning from 8:30 till 9, and it's 12-4-1 because you go into your calendar and you go 12 weeks back from the current week you're on, and you look at all the meetings, you look at all the events that you had that week, and you look at your network and say, okay, I need to reach out to that person. That person's gone a little bit quiet. I just need to say hello, or I forgot to follow that person up and I just need to resurface with that. Once you've done that, you go back to the same week, you go back to your current week and go 4 weeks back. And then you've got a little bit more fresher knowledge there, and you can reach out to people and say, actually, we were meant to schedule that meeting and we didn't. Shall we get that in the diary? Are you going to this next event? I've already booked into the next one here. So it allows you to keep that fresh. And then the 1 stands for the week before. So you're then going back into that helps you stop people slipping through the net. Did you forget to follow up anyone in particular? Did you mean to send that person an email? Did you mean to set up that meeting? And what that system does, and it only takes 20 to 30 minutes every week, it just stops those people falling through the net. and it stops those connections maybe going cold. It stops those those conversations not actually turning into anything, because I'm sure we've all had that experience where we've left an event and gone, blimey, that event was really good. I had a good conversation there, and then actually 3 or 4 weeks down the line, nothing's materialized, and you're thinking, well, that was a waste of my time. But actually it's not. It's because you either haven't been proactive enough, or that other person hasn't been proactive enough. But take that responsibility to do that yourself. So the following up process that's where I use the line, the magic of networking is in the follow up, right? So there's a little tip there that people could use.
I love the 12-4-1, and I absolutely love what you just said about, when you're following up with someone, or, how was your son's, sports day? Because what that shows also that you listened. So actually that brilliant, suggestion there of just, you've listened to that person, you've been considering them as a human being as well, which is actually really key, isn't it? Because that's the sort of thing that makes people go, oh, thanks. They actually didn't just sort of go in one ear and out the other. They actually were concerned about me and my life. And such a great thing you mentioned there, a great skill to have.
I actually talk. I find networking a hell of a lot more enjoyable if when I go into it going, I'm just genuinely interested in finding about what people have been up to in life. Whether it's me meeting someone twice my age at an event, talking about their journey going through their career, whether it's someone similar to me, what are they interested in, what they get up to outside of work. Because I think, how many business relationships start at a human level first, right? It's human relationship first, and then business second. And you only really want to work with people that you like and you get on with. So I think for me, when I shifted that mindset of going networking to try and do as much business as possible and collect as many business cards and collect as many relevant connections as possible, then turned it into actually finding out some interesting things around people that I bump into at the event, and also people that I highlighted as some people that I wanted to get to know, because suddenly you then find a common connection over something that you just would never have done, or maybe a lot further down the line. And doing that as early as possible and building up that human relationship makes that potential business relationship a hell of a lot easier to form.
Yeah, it does. Look, and such great advice, and I think you've nailed it there with that element of being human. I always say to people, your sales is not B2C or B2B, it's H to H, human to human, right? So actually, if you could be human to someone and engage with them, it's going to make such a big difference. So of course, time is flying by. We've been chatting for half hour talking, and this I knew when we get into discussion about networking. So look, I'm gonna because I'm conscious of your time, and you've got a number of things on. But just before we finish off, then. Just, anything that, as a final sort of tip for anyone that's thinking about networking, any one or two quick tips you just give them, that they're either, maybe they're in networking at the moment and they're not seeing, maybe they're getting pressure from other people to say, should they be there, or any tips, final tips you want to mention around just, when they're thinking about their networking plans for 2024, what they should be doing.
Yeah, I think, to speak specifically to salespeople, I think a lot of that pressure comes from external sources, right? From line managers wanting to see a return. So I think managing that relationship with your line manager is key. I wrote an edition of the Networker on exactly this and how you could actually manage that. So by all means, head to the Networker and find that edition. I forget which number it was, but yeah, really managing those expectations with your manager. I think focusing on less and finding the right events for you. I think understanding that networking isn't a one size fits all. So if you are going to the same events and not getting the result, it's the definition of insanity, right? It's that you're doing the same thing, and expecting different results. So for me, understanding that networking is not a one size fits all. So finding those right events, speaking to other people that maybe you click with a little bit better than others, and say, okay, which other events do you go to? I'm trying to freshen up my networking and trying to find the right events for me. And I think as a salesperson, you are naturally going to have those people that maybe overlook you because you might not be the managing director, you might not be the owner or partner of the business. So that's where having that being curious in other people really helps you stand out from all the other salespeople that are out there. And there's a common line used in networking which is be interested, not interesting. Don't have to be the most interesting person. They just have to be interested in other people. And I think as a salesperson, that will help you stand out above, head and shoulders above other salespeople that are out there, maybe scrapping around and maybe having that approach that we spoke about earlier, and maybe having those external pressures on them to get results, but actually manage that relationship with your line manager, focus on less, but be more intentful, and if that's even a word, more purposeful in fewer events, and be interested in others. I think as a salesperson, those three things are really going to help you, get those results from networking, which are ultimately what everyone's in it for, right?
Oh, sure. I love that, and I'll add one in the end, which is practice a couple of questions. So one of the other things and there's a great question which you shared with me, and you talked to me about a couple of months back, which was great. Just with a couple of questions so that you feel comfortable, because if you are a bit nervous, just have 2 or 3 questions that you can use in your mind. And one that you said was great. What are the trends that you see in your industry right now? Brilliant question to make someone feel intrigued about someone else, and for you to learn, right? Because you then can learn about the finance industry or the VA industry or the printing industry or whatever it is. So you're going to learn a couple of things and it's 1 or 2 questions, but that one being an example of something that can just help you then open up conversations with people.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's nothing wrong with going to a networking event prepared, because I think a lot of people maybe make that mistake of thinking, oh, just being in the room is enough and things will happen. But actually, no, there's nothing wrong with going to an event, sitting in your car before walking to the event and looking at 3, 4, or 5 questions that you can just have up your sleeve. You're talking about one there, what trends are you seeing in your industry? What's coming up that's exciting you at the moment? What challenges have you got coming down the road? What do you get up to outside of work? And one of the best questions that I use in terms of finding out a little bit about someone from a personal human level is, if you had tomorrow off, what would you spend your day doing? And typically it's, I'll spend the day on the golf course, or I'll take my son to the park, or I'll do this or I'll do that. And suddenly you can find out those little bits of nuggets of information that if you are listening and you're genuinely interested in finding out about other people, you'll find ways to connect more than on a business level to start with.
Love it. So look, we've come to sort of deal towards the end of the podcast, and obviously, there's so much more around networking that people learn from you. I've learned from you. Obviously, signing up to the networker is one. They can connect with you, I guess, on LinkedIn. But also, the biggest thing is come along to a Network My Club event, right? There's a series of networks. I get along to as many as I can. And there certainly is there's some fantastic locations that Bradley and his team have got access to, from all over, the southeast of the UK. And if you get a chance to go along to an event along there, they're great fun. They're very, I've always found they're very much, there's no pressure. It's a great environment, great food, great location, great company, and great people. So I guess that's where people can find you mainly. You're always at those events. But any other network you're on LinkedIn, they can. If they want to sign up to the network, where do they have to go?
Yeah, for sure. I think the network is probably the first place I would send people, because I don't know where people are listening from. I think the biggest point and myth that I'll dispel around the networker is that it's completely unbiased and very agnostic to networking, because again, as I said earlier, there's no one size fits all with networking. So I'm not using the networker to promote Network My Club, because Network My Club is not for absolutely everyone. We're not trying to be for absolutely everyone, right? So it's very agnostic. So it's really there to help senior leaders, salespeople that are out networking become better networkers, find the right events for them, approach it with a better approach. Because if we can enhance the world of networking, Network My Club will benefit, other networks will benefit, and networking will hopefully not have this stigma attached to it that it's this horrible thing and tainted word. So yeah, of course, the networker, if you just search the networker on Google, should be there at the top. Find me on LinkedIn. There's a link to the networker from that. I'll share lots of networking tips and tricks and insights on there. And if you are in any of the locations that Network My Club are in, by all means, head to our website and find an event that might be suitable for you. So a few places that people can find me.
Well, I always think it's great to have the chance to thank you so much for your time, because even though you talk to give so much around networking, you've also built a brilliant business, and that's growing from strength to strength. And like we say, maybe those that listen overseas, it may well become an international thing in time. Wouldn't it be great to see you do a Network My Club event at the Sydney Cricket Ground or I don't know, the Alliance Arena in Munich? There you go. There's maybe a vision for the future. I don't know, but
for sure.
Thank you so much for your time, Bradley, and sharing your thoughts on what you've done as a business owner to get where you have and success you have. It's incredibly inspiring for other people to just do what you did, right, and go and take that chance and go and build something, and and you built that now, and you've got that, and you're helping so many people in so many ways. So it's fantastic. So thank you so much.
Brilliant, appreciate it, James. Thanks for inviting me on.
All good. So as I say, so you have it. There's the next edition of the Diary Sales Expert podcast, all around a brilliant business network, my club, that's been created to help people really go through the challenge of meeting people, certainly if you're based in the UK, but more importantly, as Bradley's then shared, some of the stories and insights around how to build a business, but also to network effectively. So if you're unsure of how to network, head over to the network. I get it I used to. I think we had a chat before. I'm not sure what's happened, but some of the insights on there were just brilliant. And I really encourage you to sign up for that, because you will get lots of value on a regular weekly basis. So that's it for this week's edition of the podcast. Thanks so much for giving me your ears and listening in. With Bradley, I'll put a link in the show notes. Connect with Bradley and head along to an event that him and his team are running. You won't regret it. But until next week, we'll see you soon.